The wedding was to be private and discreet, a new beginning, celebration of fresh love. However, the covert ceremony between Papoose and Claressa was anything but tranquil. Rather, it became a public spectacle that will never be forgotten by everyone who attended or viewed the widely shared videos. Remy Ma entered the room in the midst of flowers, promises, and whispered secrets, completely upending the whole affair. She lost it. She did more than just show up for the wedding. Papoose was well known for being Remy Ma's dependable spouse and ride or die. They had persevered through hardships in their relationship, including turmoil, fame, and incarceration. Fans were therefore taken aback when rumors circulated on blogs and fan sites that he was moving on with rising boxing sensation Claressa Shields. Some believed it to be a joke. Others believed it might be business-related. However, speculation became confirmed when paparazzi photographed intimate dinners, matching attire, and ultimately a leaked invitation to a private union. Papoose was on his way. Not only was he moving on, but he was getting married. Only VIPs and close friends were allowed to attend. The invite list was strictly limited. Despite the fact that phones were prohibited, someone always manages to record. The setting was sophisticated, almost refined for a tale that would quickly degenerate into a disorganized urban legend. Wearing a white non-white suit, Papoose stood at the altar. Claressa looked stunning as she walked down the marble stairs in a beautiful gown with a transparent veil. Nobody anticipated what would happen when the music began to rise and the officiant inquired if anyone had any objections. The two doors swung open. There were gasps. Even though they were disguised, cameras began to record. She was there. Ma Remy dressed entirely in black, both for combat and for mourning. She didn't yell. She refrained from crying. She walked with the ferocity of a hurricane and the grace of a queen. The room went cold. Claressa appeared in disbelief. Papoose's mouth fell open. The officiant took an unsteady step back. A pin could be heard dropping. Then Remy said something. "Do you guys truly believe this to be love?" Her voice was calm, yet it cut like a knife through the tension as she spoke. "You think you can sacrifice more than 10 years for a few pillow conversations and workouts?" Nobody was brave enough to move. While some attendees made an effort to turn away, others, particularly the few influencers there, were unable to do so. The wedding had changed. Was a confrontation. Remy strode forward directly toward Claressa rather than Papoose. The quiet grew unbearable. "I gave him everything. Years, devotion, a legacy. And you're standing here now as if you deserved it?" Claressa, who was clearly scared, made an effort to remain calm. "I didn't take anything. He has had enough of you." Remy's eyes squinted. Everything erupted at that point. It was too late when security arrived. Before grabbing the wig, Remy grabbed Claressa's veil. There were screams.
Really?
The crowd stood. Once concealed, phones were now visible. This moment would not remain a secret. Like fireworks, the conflict was illuminated by the camera flashes. Papoose stood motionless, torn between acknowledging that there was no turning back and attempting to defuse the situation. Taking the microphone from the officiant, Remy looked around the gathering. "Let's reveal some secrets since you all enjoy them. What about those Miami hotel receipts? You know, the ones from when we were married?" Claressa threw herself at her. Full-fledged altercation ensued. The hair, clothing, and shoes all flew out of control. They were eventually separated by security, but the harm had already been done. The nuptials were over. Their attempt to write a love story had become a public soap opera. The videos were trending globally by the time they appeared on social media. Thousands of reposts were generated by the hashtags. Hashtag Remy Ma, hashtag PAPOOC drama, and hashtag wedding clash. They argued over who was correct. Remy lost her temper, according to some. Others stood up for her, arguing that treachery has repercussions. There were countless memes. In a matter of hours, TikTokers reproduced the scene. All parties remained mute as news outlets attempted to obtain statements. However, more was coming to light behind the scenes. More receipts were leaked by close sources. Papoose and Claressa allegedly exchanged SMS when he was still aggressively posting anniversary tributes to Remy. Screenshots of him being personally confronted by Remy weeks before the wedding. There was even a purported voice note from Remy pleading with him not to make her feel inferior and warning that she would not remain silent if he made their separation public. As it happens, Remy was aware of the wedding weeks beforehand. She was prepared because of this. Her look was a declaration rather than an accident. She had previously been portrayed as the bad guy, but this time she wanted everyone to witness her suffering. Some fans began to question whether it was a publicity hoax. Or did one of the most famous couples in hip-hop really come to an end? The inquiries continued to come in after the dust settled. What caused Papoose to move on so quickly? What was the depth of his bond with Claressa? Did Remy leave before things even started? Or was she truly taken by surprise? The timelines were not in sync. The rumors continued to spread. For a few days, Remy was absent from social media. Then, out of the blue, she shared a single tale on social media. A blank screen with the words, "Betrayal never cuts as deeply as truth." The message was unambiguous. She continued to speak. And it's obvious that the world forgot who she was. If they assumed she would leave peacefully, Papoose attempted to uphold his reputation in the interim. But criticism greeted every action. He took in public, even Claressa, who was hailed as a strong black woman who broke down barriers in boxing, started to receive hate mail on the internet. People swarmed her comment sections. The wedding pictures they attempted to share a ratio. The love story wasn't convincing. They sought clarification. Claressa's PR staff rushed behind the scenes. 2 appearances were canceled by her. Promotions were supposedly halted by one of her endorsement deals. Fighting outside of the ring and losing was a tempest she didn't expect. Remy wasn't done, though. Her next move was already planned. She had more to say, the industry insiders said. An appearance on a podcast, a candid interview, a diss track, perhaps. It was on its way, whatever it was. And it was going to be a powerful blow. Because Remy Ma does more than simply respond. She strikes back. And this was only the start. Unable to comprehend the insanity that was taking place in front of him, Papoose stood in startled stillness with his hands gripped hard at his sides. He had thought that this private ritual might provide serenity, even a bizarre sort of closure, only moments before. However, what had begun as an effort at reconciliation had descended into a complete catastrophe. The gentle music that had once filled the garden had been replaced with gasps from guests too horrified to stop it and whispers of incredulity. Still in shock from Remy Ma's blow, Claressa stumbled back, her palms shooting to her scalp. Like a prize, the remains of her formerly flawlessly styled wig hung from Remy's hand. The audience gasped, and someone shouted, "Someone stop them!" However, no one has yet to move. Everyone present was paralyzed by the intense stress. Remy didn't flinch despite her heavy breathing and the rising and falling of her chest in anger. She mocked Claressa, who had at last found her equilibrium, by lifting the wig high. "You believed you could steal everything from me and appear innocent while leaving." Remy's voice broke, a mixture of rage and sadness. "You truly believed that I would be forgotten, and you would be dressed in white at the end of this." Despite being shocked, Claressa didn't give up easily. 2 security officers eventually hurried, grabbed her arms, and pulled her back as she pounced at Remy the entire time the cameras, because, of course, cameras were rolling out of sight of the couple who intended to make this wedding into a redemption story for a documentary. The irony was that it had changed completely. Papoose, however, had remained silent. His gaze was fixed on Remy. She was more than simply his spouse. She was the person he had publicly supported throughout her lowest points and stood up for when everything seemed to be against her. However, even he had to acknowledge that he scarcely recognized this betrayed and humiliated version of her. After dropping the wig at her feet, Remy approached Papoose slowly while her heels clicked like warning shots on the marble tiles. "So what?" Her eyes were hazy when she asked him. "After everything, are you going to marry her right here?" Papoose swallowed forcefully. He started to say something, but the words became stuck in his throat, still restrained by security. Claressa yelled, "Pap, tell her the truth. Tell her how long you've been with her and how long we've been together." The audience burst out, *. Every moment of this intense meeting was being recorded by several phones that were still out. Others, fearing what might happen next, were attempting to depart in silence. Remy Ma stood waiting in the midst of everything. For him, not for the cameras or the audience. Papoose finally said something. "Remy, I didn't anticipate things turning out this way." His voice broke, laden with remorse. "But after everything, you changed. Both of us did." Remy's jaw tightened. "You dare not put it on me." "I'm not," he shot back. "However, you've been so aloof, Rem. I tried. I made an effort to improve things." Now, silently, Remy's face was streaming with tears. She wasn't crying for Papoose or Claressa. She was crying for herself, for the sacrifices she made, the years she dedicated, and the loyalty she delivered. And this was her prize. Now, unencumbered by the guards, Claressa took another step forward. "You are aware that he was planning to pop the question to me today. In the public eye, you also wrecked it." Remy gently turned to face her while dabbing at her face. "I didn't cause any damage. The moment you wanted to publicly humiliate me, you all did that." Silence returned to the room. Something had changed in the tension. Papoose understood that there was no simple solution. Someone would be broken by his decision. And perhaps, just possibly, it was too late for them all. Then police sirens sounded and everything came to a halt. It appears that the moment things became physical, someone contacted the police. And suddenly the night was illuminated by flashing red and blue lights, resembling a crime scene. Demanding order, officers surged past the guests. Remy Ma was approached by an officer. "You're being held for assault, ma'am." There were gasps. Remy's jaw fell agape. "You must be joking with me." "Okay, no, ma'am. Everything is captured on camera." The officer said, "At the station, you can explain everything." Claressa grinned contentedly. "I promise to have the last say." Remy, however, was not going to provide her with that gratification. She glanced back at Papoose, who was standing motionless, in deliberation as the officers started to accompany her away. She said, "I loved you," in a quiet voice that seemed to have lost all of her might. "Additionally, I would have fought for you. However, you gave me to the enemy." Papoose was immobile, unable to talk. He simply stood there with his lips pressed into a narrow line and his eyes wide. A hand was placed on his shoulder by Claressa. "Give her up. She made her decisions." All of us did. However, her statements seemed vacuous. The crowd gradually started to thin out as Remy Ma was led away. With ripped flowers, broken champagne glasses, and a path of mayhem left in the aftermath of one of hip-hop's most dramatic love triangles. The once magical wedding scene now resembled a battle zone. Claressa attempted to continue the ceremony. Once she was back inside the estate, but the guests had had enough. The enchantment had vanished. What about Papoose? Under the vows arch, he stood by himself, gazing into the darkness. It felt a rush of regret. It wasn't meant to end like this. However, the distinction between loyalty and treachery is extremely narrow in this world. And occasionally, there's no turning back once you've crossed it. The once bright glow of the hidden wedding location had faded into a chilly, uncomfortable calm as the sun had long since set. There were still some flickering candles blazing. their flames quivering in the wind as though they were simulating the mayhem that had just occurred. Remy Ma was gone, a queen deposed in public, taken out in handcuffs. The remains of what was meant to be Papoose's fresh start were all that remained. Under the wedding arch, he did not move. The white petals strewn across the floor looked like ashes, now symbols of a love story that had turned to dust. Guests had fled, producers had packed up their gear, and even the police had driven off. But Papoose didn't move. His mind replayed every second. The slap, the wig, the shouting, the betrayal. Claressa re-entered the room, her face still red with anger and embarrassment. "Pap," she said quietly, "you can't just stand here forever. We still have a future if we want it." He finally turned his head toward her, his eyes glassy, voice distant. "Do we?" Claressa paused, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Ace stepped down from the altar, brushing past her slowly. "You planned this whole thing like a performance. You wanted to make it a show. That's not love. That's control." Claressa scoffed, her defensive walls shooting up. "So now it's my fault. She came in here like a damn hurricane. She humiliated both of us." "No," he said softly, turning to face her. "She humiliated you. I was already broken before she walked in." Those words hit harder than any. Slap Remy would have thrown. Claressa's face hardened. "So what? Are you going back to her?" "I don't know," Papoose admitted. "But I can't go forward with this. Not like this. Not with you." She opened her mouth to respond, but stopped herself. There was no fight left in her. The wedding was over, the fantasy shattered. Papoose walked away from her, heading out. Into the night, leaving her standing under the arch with nothing but a stained dress and a ruined reputation. Hours later, Remy Ma sat alone in a small holding cell, arms folded tightly across her chest. The adrenaline had worn off, replaced by exhaustion and disbelief. A female officer had handed her a cup of water earlier, but she hadn't touched it. She kept thinking about the look on Papoose's face, the hurt, the silence, the betrayal. Was it worth it? That's the question that haunted her. She didn't regret defending herself, but maybe she had let the fire inside her burn too hot. Maybe she had scorched everything in her path, including the man she loved. A buzzer sounded, and a voice called out, "Reminisce, Mackie! You've made bail!" Her heart skipped. As she was escorted out, she saw who was waiting for her in the lobby, Fat Joe. He opened his arms. He really had to go full Bronx. "On M, huh?" Remy couldn't help the small laugh that escaped her lips, even as tears welled in her eyes. She rushed into his arms, grateful to see a familiar face. "I messed everything up, Joey," she whispered. He pulled back, holding her shoulders. "Nah, you defended yourself. That's who you are. But now you have to decide who you want to be moving forward." Meanwhile, Papoose sat alone in a hotel room he had booked for what was supposed to be the honeymoon. The silence was unbearable. He scrolled through his phone, every app showing footage of the disaster. Memes were already being made and hashtags were trending. Hashtag Remy VSCLARESSA. Hashtag Wedding Wreck. And hashtag PAPOOSE caught in the middle. He turned it all off and tossed the phone aside. What stung the most wasn't the public humiliation, was the realization that somewhere along the way, he'd lost his compass. In trying to find comfort with Claressa, he had abandoned the one person who stood by him through thick and thin. Remy had her flaws, sure. But hadn't they both? By the next morning, the world had split into factions. Some sided with Remy, hailing her as a woman scorned who refused to be disrespected. Others mocked her, calling her bitter and washed up. Meanwhile, Claressa tried to spin the narrative in her favor with a teary-eyed Instagram live, painting herself as the true victim. But it wasn't working. The internet is quick to judge, even quicker to forget the truth. Papoose, realizing the storm wouldn't pass on its own, decided to speak. That afternoon, he posted a video to his followers, sitting in a dark room, with nothing but a single light overhead. "I owe everyone an explanation," he began. "But most of all, I owe Remy an apology. Not for what happened last night, but for everything that led up to it." He paused. "I thought I could move on. I thought love was about comfort and convenience. But love is about loyalty, about fighting through the storm, not running from torning. And I failed her. I failed myself." The video went viral instantly. Remy watched it in silence, tears silently tracing lines down her cheeks. She didn't know what came next, didn't even know if reconciliation was possible. But for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. A few days later, the media circus calmed down and Papoose made his way to Remy's place. No cameras, no script. Just him and a whole lot of apologies to offer. She opened the door slowly, folding her arms. "What do you want, Pap?" "To talk," he said simply. "To be real." Remy studied him for a long moment before stepping aside. And just like that, they started talking not as celebrities. Not as scandal headlines, but as to people who had been through hell and maybe, just maybe, still had a little heaven left to fight for. Because love in the spotlight is brutal. But sometimes the biggest victories come after the darkest falls. If this wild roller coaster of love, betrayal, and public breakdowns had your jaw on the floor, just wait, this story is far from over. What happens next with Remy Ma, Claressa, and Papoose could flip the entire narrative upside down. Will Remy get her redemption arc? Will Papoose truly walk away from the chaos? And is Claressa plotting her next move as we speak? We've seen the secret weddings, the fights, and the viral tears, but the fallout has only just begun. So if you want to stay one step ahead of the drama and catch every twist the moment it drops, do yourself a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications right now. Your support helps us dig deeper, break the hottest stories first, and bring you the real tea without the sugarcoating. And if you're feeling bold, drop a comment below. Who's really to blame in all of this? Team Remy, Team Claressa, or is Papoose just caught in the crossfire? Trust me, you won't want to miss what we're dropping next. It's just the beginning. It's about to get even messier. Stay locked in, stay loud, stay legendary. Legendary.